don't want to get ahead of it, but that's what's going on. So,
hello, everybody. Welcome to the community. So my name is Jacobson. I'm the Director of Demand Side Management. The team here asked me to talk about Prop 39, and the specific request was give me a case study of a school that really mattered. But in reflecting about this and really thinking about it, they all matter. Every one of our projects mattered, even from the base level lighting projects all the way to those projects where we reached deep and implemented solar, we electrified, we addressed fenestration, we addressed building envelope measures. They all mattered. And so how could I pick a school? So I didn't pick a school. Sorry, Sean, couldn't. So what I realized is that when we're looking at state level programs, we should really look at Prop 39 as the example of a program that worked. Now, it's not the California Public Utilities Commission, it's the Energy Commission. The funding mechanisms are different, but the net benefit to the community was astounding. And to give you a little bit of a perspective, I've been working within the EE proceeding with the PUC for the last 11 years. I've lived and breathed this stuff. I had to bite my tongue on the three-prong test, and I'll mention it in a little bit because I live and breathe that as well, particularly with the total resource costs. I get really nerdy with the total resource costs. And hopefully, what's that? Yeah. And hopefully, by moving, the total resource cost out of the three-prong test at the portfolio level, that's going to move this. But I dare not say that that's going to be perfect, because when you look at PG&E's portfolio at a high level, over 30% is in residential, and that's home energy reports with consultation, which is a behavioral measure coupled with primary lighting. And so that's really telling when commercial energy efficiency is not penciling. So Prop 39 really stands out as best practice. Why? Over the last 5-6 years, our team has just worked tirelessly to build local capacity, to address cost effectiveness. And I'll come back to that because it's really comparing the Energy Commission's savings to investment ratio to the PUC's total resource cost. And how we look at cost effectiveness to ratepayers versus taxpayers is really an important conversation for us to have. Local measures of success. And really, to me, what's most important is how do we tie this all to a decarbonized future and look at Prop 39 as a best practice. Because when we're out there, when we're talking to commissioners, when we're talking to stakeholders, when we're filing our comments and reply comments today, I believe, for three-prong tests and fuel substitution. So if you didn't get those in, you should be like moving and talking about how the Public Advocate's Office is incorporating or requesting that panel upgrade costs are made part of the participant costs, which will push the TRC down. A fuel substitution measures, just got to plug that. Really important that that doesn't happen. How we can come to these stakeholders and say, look, Prop 39, this program, the extension, which is SB 110, and the ECA ED 0% loan for schools, and even the ECA program, the Energy Commission is doing some amazing things out there, and we should be paying attention. And so what has it done locally for us? It's really empowered our team to grow. How many of you are familiar with Government Code 4217 in the public sector? None. It's an amazing tool, and it's been around since 1983. And most people in the space aren't 100% comfortable with it, or they're not familiar with it. Government Code 4217 allows you within the public space to effectively do design build projects underneath very specific thresholds. It allows you to use the best value criteria in selecting bidders opposed to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. It fundamentally changes the way that you implement public works projects that have an energy impact. The only gotcha is that the payback has to be shorter than the actual effective useful life of the technologies. It even changes notification. It's a game changer. Prop 39 has given our team an opportunity to explore fuel substitution, electrification. So we had the money there to invest in hiring consultants and teams of experts to figure out how do we address panel upgrades? How do we look at propane to natural, or propane to electric measures, or even natural gas to electric measures. The Department of Industrial Relations is a beast to wrestle in this space. So it's given us an opportunity to go in there to address codes and standards, to work with the California Department of Education and the Department of State Architects. And so when you're really looking at this from a public sector perspective, Prop 39 has been a game changer. But a lot of the lessons learned that we've internalized through Prop 39 can be deployed into the private sector as well. And so we really have to start looking at beyond Prop 39 and how do we marry these lessons learned within Prop 39 and deliver them outside of that space. And to do that, we really, again, have to talk cost effectiveness. And so, again, I warned you, I'm a nerd, especially on this stuff. And I especially like to talk about the total resource cost compared to the savings to investment ratio and how that impacts program design, because there is a significant impact. And so how many of you are familiar with the total resource cost in the equation? Okay, good. How about the savings to investment ratio through the Energy Commission? Okay. And really at the end of the day, they both just compare benefits over costs, but they're fundamentally different. And so the total resource cost is really looking, they don't, honestly, that measure doesn't really look at the benefit to the ratepayer. It looks at the benefit to, the larger grid, to society. It incorporates free riders. N to G stands for net to gross. And so that N to G, or your net realization factor, takes things into consideration like participants less free riders, spillover, net realization, including gross realization rates and in-service rates. I'm getting really nerdy, I apologize. But it's really incorporating all these factors that the Energy Division of the Public Advocate's Office really said, hey, look, to really get an accurate measure on whether or not this pencils, we have to internalize this stuff. And it really pushes that TRC down. If you've been following the EE proceedings, if IOUs and PAs, program administrators such as Marin Clean Energy, Lancaster, our board just approved our staff to move forward with becoming a PA up here as well last night, which was a huge achievement. We have to deliver a TRC that exceeds 1 in the first couple of years and then 1.25 after 3 years. This is not easy to do. And every step that moves us towards having a larger denominator makes it incrementally harder. And so we have to be really conscientious about that. Now, the savings to investment ratio is much different. It's really looking at the net benefit to that participant. And so I'm not sitting here saying that we should necessarily go to the commission and remove total resource cost or the PAC, or blow it all up and go to the societal cost test if you're really a cost effectiveness nerd. But what I am saying is that we should examine how these two different cost effectiveness metrics effectively define programs and how programs move forward and what we could do. We could never do, even if the fuel substitution PD had moved forward a year and a half ago, we would struggle to have an effective portfolio of efficiency measures in climate zone 1 that would support electrification. This is not to say it's not going to happen, but it is a challenge that we need to keep our eyes on closely. We could do this underneath the savings to investment ratio, and we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to bring that to our conversations and saying, to really truly electrify, to really truly access the energy efficiency funds that this proposed decision may allow us to access, we need to be cognizant of how the total resource cost may impact our ability to deploy those measures into our communities. So what is the measure of success? In my mind, it's the net good that we're doing for our community. What have we done in our community? To date, our team has deployed more than $5 million in project funding. We've offset more than 1.75 million kWh, and that's gross, not net realized. You can read through here. It's been pretty amazing for Humboldt, considering we have a relatively small market. We have been able to deploy smart thermostats, advanced lighting, so with daylight sensing communicative devices, lots of solar, heat pumps, refrigeration, windows, duct sealing. We've completely rebuilt walk-ins. So it's just been phenomenal. And one of the approaches that we took was say, look, let's do lighting and then pick a deferred maintenance, then pick something really cool. And then we can make it work. And so the Prop 39 program has really empowered our team to go beyond what the EE proceeding within the PUC allows us to do. We've been slinging light bulbs for 13 years in refrigeration. Prop 39 empowered us to go beyond that. And so we really need to embrace that as a community who really wants to move decarbonization forward and bring that to NRDC and LARA and others who are working really, really hard to move the conversation beyond TRC and beyond this notion of just saying it's all about total resource cost or nothing. Because really, although the public goods charge sunset in 2012, we need to go back to the table and say, if we want to meet SB 350 goals and we want to meet these aggressive state mandates, we need to look at how we're bringing these different resources together, particularly SGIP, the SGIP proceeding, the decarb proceeding, the energy efficiency proceeding, and marry that with what the Energy Commission is doing. And with that, I say we should look at Prop 39 as best practice and really work with our legislators and our regulators to internalize that into future program design. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael now.
So what I'm going to talk about is mostly about local wind, but how it fits into the overall picture of decarbonization and sustainable energy for Humboldt County. That I wear two hats. That I'm Sean's partner in Redwood Energy. I actually turned him on to heat pumps years ago. And also, I am the vice mayor of Arcata, and I represent Arcata on the Redwood Coast Energy Authority board. I'm currently the chair of the Redwood Coast Energy Authority board, and I work with Lou, who's the director of demand side resources, and also with the director of power resources, and with the executive director Matthew Marshall. Fortunately for Humboldt County, that we have the best wind resource, the strongest and the most consistent winds in all of North America, which is a tremendous opportunity for this area. My personal goal in working in energy and also running for office and getting elected to office and being in my current position is to run this county exclusively on local renewable energy and to electrify everything in this county and to eliminate the use of natural gas and fossil fuels for vehicles. So currently, we at RCEA are involved in two wind projects. There is an onshore project from a company called Terragen, which they would like to build in the next 2 years. That would be approximately 125 megawatts and would provide about 60% of the current electricity consumption for Humboldt County. The second project is unique and a very new technology using what's called floating offshore wind technology. Unlike the Atlantic coast and unlike the North Sea in Europe, where doing offshore wind is much easier because the water is relatively shallow and they can do a conventional structure down to the seabed, our shore drops off very quickly. And so that in the type of places where we have the best wind resources, they might be as deep as 5,000 feet. And so conventional structure is impossible. And so 2 years ago, RCEA was approached by a startup in Emeryville called Principal Power. Principal Power has developed floating offshore wind technology that will allow wind turbines to operate in these very deep waters. They first developed a prototype they've operated off the coast of Portugal, and they approached us 2 years ago with a proposal to do a 120 megawatt initial system off our coast. That would be large enough to cover 90% of the electricity for this county, pushing us beyond 100% and allowing us to electrify everything for the county and eventually become a net exporter of electricity. The technical resource, the amount of energy that could be economically developed for this county is 10 times larger than that. We have a very much underutilized port in Eureka, about 10 miles south of here. During the heyday of the timber industry, it was a very large and vibrant port. It's declined a lot now, but that gives us a tremendous opportunity. As part of the proposal that Principal Power brought to us is their vision of making redeveloping the Port of Eureka and making it the West Coast hub for the entire offshore wind industry. Even though we have the best winds here in Humboldt County, there are also excellent winds other places along the coast. So the ultimate vision is to redevelop the port of Eureka, making it the place where entire wind turbine assemblies could be assembled in port and towed out to the job site. Unlike onshore wind, there's really no limit to how large an assembly could be. So we could have a 12 megawatt wind turbine installation, 800 feet tall, assembled in the port of Eureka, towed out through the opening to the port. And fortunately, unlike the Golden Gate, we have no bridge. So an 800-foot tall structure could actually be towed through our port, 20 miles offshore, and anchored in place, and the cable run. And we could have 10 of these operating. The plan for that is about 6 years, around 2025, 2026. Recently, our state senator held a workshop in Eureka, bringing together a number of the experts that are involved in wind development. One person that I met, who I'm very excited about working with, is Mary Collins, who's a researcher connected with UC Berkeley and heads something called the American Jobs Project. The focus of her effort is the opportunity for economic development and job creation related to the offshore wind industry. One thing I suggested to Mary, and that we've just started recently, is a offshore wind working group. Starting with Mary's work, working with Robert Collier, who's done economics for offshore wind, and also bringing in other coastal communities such as Morro Bay and the Central Coast. And so as sort of building on the very successful effort of the Building Decarbonization Group that's headed by NRDC and Pierre and Rachel Golden from Sierra Club, Mary and I want to do something similar with offshore wind. As we've all seen from the duck curve, solar is great. We're producing a tremendous amount of energy, but we have a tremendous surplus at certain times of day, certain times of the year. Wind and offshore wind very much complement solar. And so for an excellent location like ours, that the offshore wind is much steadier on a summer to winter basis. It's much steadier on a day to night basis. As solar is dropping in the afternoon, wind is coming up. And so this is an excellent complement. And so if we're going to be running the state exclusively on renewable energy, we're going to need both onshore wind, offshore wind, and solar as the complete set of energy resources to make this possible. And of course, as we've been talking, building decarbonization and electrification. So in this diagram, red, the color code is the darker red is the strongest resource, and lighter colors are low resources. So we're up to almost 10 meters per second. And the power of wind is the cube of the velocity. So we have an incredible resource here in Humboldt County. So this is our timeline for development of our offshore wind. That, as I said, we started working with Principal Power about 2 years ago. We're going through a lease process that, because the state limit is 3 miles offshore and the optimum and strongest wind location is about 20 miles offshore. So that would be in federal waters, and that would be under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. So as you can see from this, we have planning, we have a submission process for a lease for offshore. There also are other companies that are interested. So we may have other bidders that RCEA is partner with Principal Power, who's the developer of the floating offshore wind technology. And we also have very strong industrial partners, EDPR, which is based on the National Electricity Company of Portugal, and Acre Solutions, who has lots of experience in the oil industry with offshore oil development. So We may not love the offshore oil industry or the oil industry at all, but they have a lot of experience that's directly relevant to what we're trying to do. So the final timeline would be to have, as they call, steel in the water around 2024, 2025. Humboldt County is also a winter peaking area that, since we have no air conditioning, our heaviest energy use is in the winter. And as we electrify, our peak will become even more shifted towards winter. In other parts of the state, that's not yet happening, but it also will be true as we electrify. One thing that Sean and I have found is that the heaviest energy use in the projects that we work on is water heating, but we've also found that space heating in almost all of the state, except for the farthest south deserts, is larger than air conditioning. So even though the peaks are larger with air conditioning, the total annual energy use is larger with space heating than with water heating. So this is a list of the partners that we have in this. The lead partners, as I said, are Redwood Coast Energy Authority, Principal Power, EDP Renewables, Acre Solutions, and then, although not direct partners, providing services that we need, H.T. Harvey for environmental services, and Herrera. That the turbines will be, as I said, roughly 20 miles offshore, offshore substation to concentrate the energy from the individual turbines, and then an undersea cable slightly below the seabed, not very deep, probably 5 feet or so, and then an onshore station. The a little bit long term would be a undersea cable going all the way from Humboldt County all the way to the Golden Gate. So there's tremendous opportunity in the county south of here, in Mendocino County, in Sonoma County, or in Marin County. So the idea would be to run a high power undersea cable to the Golden Gate and have taps all along the way. Estimates are that approximately 30% of the electricity for the state of California could be produced by offshore wind. So it's a great untapped opportunity and technology that is in the pre-commercial stage, but is very close to being within the commercial stage and is likely to become cost competitive with onshore wind within the next 10 years.